So I'm here at the Delta Summit in Malta with Dr. Max Ganado, who is from Ganado Advocates, who is behind the legislation that has made all of this happen here in Malta. I've got a question for you first. Of course, there's never been any legislation relating to blockchain before, because Malta is the first country to do this. Where on earth do you start?
I mean, you certainly start with strategy, and you certainly need to become excited about what it can do. So for a long time, we were debating what the world will look like in the model we wanted it to look like, in terms of doing things which we couldn't do before. And the big story that catches everybody's attention is that in Africa, there are more people who have mobile phones than those who have bank accounts. And therefore in Africa, people can talk to each other, but they can't send money to each other. And therefore, by enabling a mobile phone to deal with the transfer of money through technology, you can actually solve a massive, massive world problem, which is causing poverty in the world. So you start with, a strategy which is going to address a passion that many, many people have and can understand. And then you start realizing that, this technology is really, really building up on the strengths of the internet. And the internet allows us to communicate, but what if we can do the same thing with transactions? So it's going to make it so much easier for people to do things together without the massive bureaucracy and intermediation that exists in the world today. And that is certainly going to help everybody, have a better life.
So when it comes, of course, blockchain is going to obviously change the world. We know that's coming. But when it comes to legislation, why do we need legislation, and where is the point of reference? Where do you start with that?
Well, the issue was that in this field, there was such a lot of uncertainty about how the laws apply. So the obvious challenge is come out with anything which is going to make it more clear than nothing. And so we started on a strategy which is going to say, if we can clarify some things within the industry or within the sector, it's always going to be better than nothing. And the point where everything had to start was regulation, basically, because we have a combination in our legal systems between laws which you can apply if you want to and laws which are called mandatory. You have to observe them. Now in this field, because it touches money and financial industries and investments, you have a lot of mandatory laws. You've got money laundering laws, you've got privacy laws, you've got consumer protection laws, and these have to apply. So how are we going to do something to enable those laws to apply in a predictable manner, and a manner which gives credibility to people involved? Otherwise, they're going to be, targeted as breaking the law, as criminals, as people who, there could be some criminals, obviously, that are doing it, but certainly not everybody who is excited about this is intending, bad things. So we started by saying, okay, you must start with regulation. And the 3 laws that have been enacted actually address that part of the issue. And we now know which regulatory laws apply to which blockchain platforms and which tokens. And by doing that, it's a breath of fresh air. You create predictability and certainty for people wanting to do business in this area.
And this, of course, being able to establish the legislation and put that in place has now propelled Malta as a leading force in blockchain technology in the world. So does that mean that your legislation is now going to be a benchmark for everybody else to catch up?
Well, actually, yes, because we were one of the first who took a position, means that we've sort of set an approach. And what was very interesting is we actually designed an approach which is innovative in itself, typical of this sector. We created part of the regulation which is mandatory, you must observe the rules, and we created part of it which is voluntary, you can observe them if you wish. The bit on ICOs, the bit that touches money, the bit that touches securities, that you have to observe the law, So ICOs, which is the dangerous part of this sector as it affects people in the street, has to be subject to mandatory law. On the other hand, when it comes to designing a platform which is going to enable people to share information, share documents, transact among themselves, if they don't involve necessarily the money side, the ICO side or the security side, then that's voluntary, and you can decide to reach our standards and get certified or get recognized by the government or not. Now, we put the bar higher for people to move towards it, and it's already happening. So we're very proud to have done what we've done, because we've created a target to which the industry can converge. And if it does, it's going to be compliant with the mandatory laws in the legal ecosystems, which is great. Now, having said that, because we were the first, we obviously took a big risk, and we're still running a risk, because, you know, being the first in anything is potentially something that can fail. But what we're seeing now is that other countries have obviously seen the momentum of what we've done and are looking at the direction. And for instance, France has adopted the idea of a voluntary regulation regime for all its activities. So they went, you know, on one angle to what we did, and other countries are starting to speed up their regulation in order to come in line with this clarity which comes out of knowing, you know, and predicting how the law is going to apply. So it's a good story to follow.
Well, it's a great story, and it's a great story for Malta. And my question regarding that would be, what are the implications of Malta? How is this benefiting Malta, and what will be the impact for Malta, for this small country?
You know, what was very clear to us all is that Malta is small, and geographically we can't sustain an enormous business. But when you realize that this business is going to be digital and on the internet, then our limitations don't matter. It's the ideas that matter. So if you look at where we're going now, we're looking at use cases of blockchain which go from health to education, into the charity sector, into the climate change sector, social good, and obviously into the financial sector, because we have one. But, you know, being too intensive in terms of space, people and resources is a threat to our success. So we have to find a way to balance the human resources and the resources, you know, the space resources, with the potential that this can have. And, you know, it's ecologically friendly. You know, we're not going to pollute the seas with more plastic. You know, so there's a passion in terms of a strategic approach to the future, which I think is going to be fun seeing, you know, how this develops in the future.
Dr. Max Ganado, just one more question for you. What comes after regulation?
Okay, that's an exciting question for me, because I'm passionate about the next step. In our original proposals to the government, we had suggested that we need to deal with some private law issues which are critical. One of the ideas is to give legal personality to technology arrangements which are complex, which operate like real people and real businesses. And that has been accepted, and now we're working on a new law which is going to launch the concept of a technology entity, which could protect consumers through its design and could comply with the law through its smart contracts. And it's all formed within a legal entity, so that there is certainty in terms of who you're dealing with, who you sue, where you put your money, and this sort of stuff. So that is the next step. Behind that, there's the even bigger issue of dealing with private law. You know, this is an international cross-border phenomenon, and nobody knows which law applies to it. Is it the law of America? Is it the law of Malta? Is it the law of China? Nobody knows, because it's cross-border. So these are big issues. When a person doesn't know their rights, or doesn't know their duties, or doesn't know their liability, you've got a major legal uncertainty. So we're trying to start addressing that, and we're going to basically come in with a set of private law provisions which are going to deal with liability, which are going to deal with ownership of property, of tokenization of assets, and this sort of stuff. And that is, from a legal point of view, at least from my perspective, is even more exciting than the first. And our strategy is already clear. We're not going to try to force people to apply Maltese law to everything. The attitude is, you know, set up in the internet and the cyberspace and so on, but you have to have a legal system which you should be free to choose with certainty, that if you choose it, it is going to apply with predictability. And that is what we are aiming at. Obviously, if you don't choose anything and you're in Malta, then Maltese law will apply. And to the question, okay, so what does Maltese law say about tokens? We have to have an answer. And that is what we're working on as well.
Brilliant.